Welcome to The Impossible, where we empower others to face the impossible, inspire them to be impossible, and motivate them to do the impossible. I'm Matt, and we are back this week with another episode. This weekend, Saturday, August 23rd, 2025, will be the world's first ever full power para powerlifting meet. This means it's open to all para and adaptive athletes. No matter what your disability is, we want you to step on the platform and bring your very highest potential. And thanks to Clayton Workman and many of the monsters at Monsters Bent Barbell, as well as the incredible efforts by the United States Powerlifting Coalition, or USPC, they have created the space and the opportunity in the face of these challenges for this meet to occur. And guys, I am so beyond excited and honored to be a part of this competition, to be able to step on that platform with so many other impossible athletes who face challenges in day-to-day life that they shouldn't even be able to compete. They shouldn't even be able to complete their day-to-day tasks, let alone be able to step on the platform and face massive weights under which they find their very highest potential. And you guys will get to see all of these athletes this weekend. If you're not able to make it out to the event, you will surely see them online through the media we're going to provide. Because we feel that it's so important to showcase these athletes, because so many of them live out our mission and our vision on a daily basis for what we spread at Impossible Performance. And I personally could not have found a better opportunity to find my very highest potential under the bar than this meet. If you guys have been following our show or our platform or our media for a while, you know that I've been chasing a 500-pound squat for many years now at this point. And while it seems to me sometimes that it has all come together quite quickly, if I look at the reality of it, it's really been over the last 3 years that I've been training for this lift. I started getting really competitive with the squat in August of 2023. I believe it was that meet I first squatted 300 on the platform. Fast forward a year later to August 2024, I do 425. Then in December, I do 462. And now, August of 2025, I'm fully prepped and ready to squat 500 pounds as a below-knee amputee. And honestly, I think we're going to find an even higher potential than that. And there's been so many times along this journey, not even just looking at the last 3 years, but especially in the last 16 weeks since I've been preparing for this meet. There have been so many times that I felt like my body is just completely broken due to a lot of the disease, as well as many of the side effects I still face and am still battling from the chemotherapy and the ECMO that I battled when fighting for my life against cancer. But fortunately, I've been here before. In fact, I've now lived most of my life feeling like my body is broken. Whether it's the extreme levels of muscle breakdown I have, the liver issues, the kidney issues, whatever it may be, this was not an easy prep for me. But it shouldn't have been. I'm not chasing an easy goal. And there have been many nights where I struggle to find sleep because all I can think about is, how am I possibly going to squat 500 pounds? Even a month ago, I had those thoughts running through my head. Yet, there's something we've found at Impossible Performance that allows us to transcend these physical limitations, these physical challenges, and pull a higher level of potential out than we ever should have been able to achieve. And we've had to do this because that's what Austin and I have continually faced. Our bodies being broken, our bodies sometimes seeming as if they betray us. But your potential, your performance is not limited solely by your physical capabilities. And what we've come to realize is there are actually 4 domains of performance. Physical is just one of them. And you guys have probably heard us hint at these before, and our content is going to start shifting to having a pretty heavy focus on each of these 4 domains. It's taken us several years to quantify and realize something we already knew, but just couldn't quite find the words for it. Couldn't quite elucidate exactly how to define it or be able to pass these mindsets, these lessons, these things we've learned along the way onto others. Yet, because it's been our main focus, our main goal, our ultimate vision for everything we're doing, to be able to give these insights, to be able to give this knowledge to others and help them find their highest potential through it, we're finally at a point where we're making significant headway in this pursuit. And going forward, this will continue to be our biggest focus in being able to break down and give stepwise fashion and pattern to exactly how you can incorporate these steps, these processes, this path into your own journey, chasing whatever it is that you're passionate about. And I've had to lean on those very heavily throughout this prep. As you guys have heard me talk about quite a lot in the last few months, there's been a lot that has changed in my life in a very positive manner. And one thing I came to realize is that I was trying to live as if all of my top priorities, my top focuses, were my number one priority. I had 4 number one priorities, and unfortunately, that's not how priorities work. You can't put 100% of yourself into 4 separate things all at the same time. And even though I believed I could make it all work, it was causing me to suffer in all 4 areas because I was never putting enough time, energy, and resource into each of those areas. And ultimately what I realized is that I had to quantify these priorities. I had to figure out what exactly is most important to me. And then how does the order fall for the rest? And once I had that figured out, this order of my priorities, then I needed to realize that, I'm actually living quite disordered compared to how my priorities are actually set up. Once I realized that, I realized there were some changes I had to make. And going forward, I will have my life more conducively set up to allow me to maximize those priorities which are most important to me and be able to step back a little bit from those which are not quite as high on the list right at the moment. We'll get more on that later because this is something that has been incredibly beneficial and effective in my life, and I know it's got a lot of potential to help you guys out with a lot of the problems you face in day-to-day life, because let's face it, the number one resource we are all lacking in more than anything else is time. None of us who are passionately pursuing those things that are greatest to us feel as if we have enough time to accomplish everything. Yet, some of the world's highest performers have the exact same amount of time in a day that we do. Now, we may have different responsibilities, different requirements, whatever that is, but we all have 24 hours every day that we get to decide 100% how we will utilize those hours. And so I knew there had to be a way to do it. Because when you look at individuals leagues above where I'm operating at now, they all have those same amount of hours. Yeah, they've got maybe more money or more resources at their disposal, but they still had to get there somehow with those same 24 hours a day. So what is it they're doing? What is it they've unlocked that I was missing out on? And I think we've figured out what it is. But we'll have more on that later. Because tonight I want to discuss mostly these 4 domains of performance, specifically in regard to my journey toward this 500-pound squat, as somewhat of a case study to give an example of what we're going to be spending a vast amount of time on our media and all of our content discussing going forward. The 4 domains of performance are as follows. One of them, as we discussed already, is physical, and that's a huge one. It's a massive one. But as Austin and I so intimately know, and as I know a lot of our listeners know, the physical domain can be easily compromised, even at times we least expect it. But there are 3 other domains which are equally, if not more powerful when developed correctly, and are not so easily compromised. Those are mental, emotional, and spiritual. Now, those 3 can all kind of go hand in hand sometimes, but I like to really think of the 4 not so much as 4 separate corners of a square, but as 4 different points along the same circle. Because sometimes 2 or 3 of those domains can become very closely tied to one another, whereas other times they may drift further apart. It's kind of a constant ebb and flow in how they all relate to each other, how they all support each other, or contrary, how they can tear each other down sometimes. And it's these other 3 domains, particularly for me, the mental and spiritual, that have carried me through so much of my life and so much of the challenge I've faced, but particularly in these last 16 weeks. When I'm under a squat bar, my body feels broken and I'm doing half the weight that I'm hoping to do on the platform, and it feels heavier than anything I can move. When I'm laying awake in bed at night, wondering how I'm possibly going to move this 500 pounds, wondering if it's something I should even pursue, wondering if I'm making the right choice. It's these domains I rely on to keep me on the correct path, to give me clarity, to give me guidance, to give me strength, to help me find potential beyond what my body is lacking. And if you guys have followed on for a while, you know that even though I have one leg and that creates serious challenge in regard to the squat, it is far from my greatest physical challenge at the moment. So much of what I face that severely hinders me from a physical standpoint is much more internal to the biological mechanisms that should be performing correctly that aren't due to significant damage from some treatments I've had in my life for my cancer. And that's okay, because those treatments saved my life. It's allowed me to be here today, allowed me to do what we're doing, and it's still allowed me to get under 500 pounds and move that weight. So I'm incredibly thankful for the physical gifts and capabilities that I do still have left. But it's been a delicate balance getting here. The number 1 domain that I've had to rely on is the mind. When you gain control over a significant portion of the subconscious actions of your mind, it opens your world up to a whole new level of potential. And mostly because the way you see things, the way you react to things, the way you interpret things changes. It's almost as if you start seeing things from a 30-foot view. You can take a step back, view everything with a totally detached perspective, which allows you to not have negative emotional reactions, to not have actions where you say or do things that you don't mean, or that you don't regret, or that you may regret, that you maybe haven't thought through fully. But even more than that, it allows you to rewire your programming, rewire your default settings, and even to the point that I believe you can take it so far as to be able to use your mind to change your own physiology. Now, I know this sounds quite extreme, and I can't necessarily cite a lot of scientific literature to back this up, but it's something I 100% know I've been able to do in my own life. I know that others have been able to unlock it as well. And it's something that really comes at no risk. At the very worst, you still end up better than an untrained, undeveloped mind. And the mind is something that's not given as much credence in athletics in general, but especially in strength sports. Certainly in the endurance world, they're very heavily focused on the mind because a lot of the specific movements they're doing are actually quite easy. You know, in general, for most people, like to jog along at an easy zone 2 pace is easy enough until you do it for 6, 8, 10, 12, 24 hours straight. And some who do it even more, over hundreds of miles. And that's where you really have to develop and train the mind, because your body will break down far, far before your mind will. And in fact, your mind will try to shut you down if you allow it and if you've not trained it properly. But on the contrary to that, you can also use the mind to enhance your physical capability, to pull out a higher potential than ever would have been there before. And that's a significant part of what I've had to do. It's almost like how on your phone or on your computer or whatever it may be, you have default settings. The factory defaults is what they're referred to. But you can go in and change all of those. You can change which words certain typings might autocorrect to. You can change the wallpaper. You can change your app layout. You can change how when you press different buttons, it goes to different actions. Your mind is no different. You can reprogram all of those default settings. Now, it's not easy. It takes a lot of time and energy and focus and repetition. But the more you do it, the more times you successfully implement it, the better you get at it, just as with anything else we pursue in life. To the point that you can reprogram your mind to, when you see a challenge, when you face a challenge, you see opportunity instead. You see everything good about that challenge and are able to quickly and easily reject the negative. Now, this doesn't mean that you're never susceptible to those subconscious reactions of when somebody cuts you off in traffic, it angers you. Doesn't mean that those totally go away. In a lot of cases they can, but it isn't totally eliminated from your life. What it means, though, is that you shorten that window of that reaction from when you lose control slightly to when you're back in control. It shortens that window so much to the point that the window becomes insignificant because you will not have betrayed your path or your actions or what you're pursuing in life before you get back in control. And nothing has helped me build this quite like squatting. You see, for me, squatting is about the most unnatural movement I can do now. Even though it's a very natural movement for the human body, it is not in any way, shape, or form a natural movement for a body that's had one of its limbs removed. And yes, I have a prosthetic. And yes, that prosthetic allows me to squat. And yes, I can still generate some power and force out of that side. But imagine trying to squat on stilts, for example. This whole protrusion from your limb that you can't quite control, you can't quite balance on, you can't feel at all, and you don't even quite know where it is in space at any given moment. And that's kind of what it's like squatting on a prosthetic. And it kind of rewires that inherent biological response to where certain things just feel totally unnatural. For my feet to be off the ground feels totally unnatural now. For me to move into certain positions like a squat is totally unnatural. It feels incredibly unsafe, incredibly dangerous, and something that every fiber of my subconscious soul is screaming for me to not do. And yet every week I get the opportunity to climb under a bar that far exceeds my own body weight, to be able to move into this incredibly vulnerable position, to face that fear, to work through that fear, to walk forward and move with that fear in my heart, and have complete and total acceptance and understanding that that fear is okay. And in fact, it's good. Because while I cannot control the fear itself, I can totally control who I am when moving with that fear. And in fact, I can even take it so far as to be able to rework it and redirect it and guide it toward giving me strength to pull out that higher physical potential in the face of that impossible challenge. So this is a domain we're going to spend a lot of time speaking on, but I've been particularly able to strengthen and train and develop it by facing this movement that is so unnatural to me, putting myself in a situation week after week where I feel this intense fear. I feel my mind wanting to give in and give up and tell me to quit and tell me that I shouldn't be here. And I work through that and I gain control. I shorten that window, that period where I lose control to where now it's almost essentially non-existent. And I'm able to maintain full and total and complete control despite those emotions that are coursing through my veins. And I tell my body that it is capable, no matter what the challenges it's facing right now. It can move through this weight. It will move through this weight. I've done impossible things before. I will do them again. And then whether the weight does or does not move, for me, almost becomes irrelevant, because I win the battlefield of the mind. And for me, that is the skill I'm chasing far and beyond anything else. So that is the first domain of performance, the mind. The second is the spirit. The spirit is probably the hardest of all four to quantify, to really define what it means and what it is. I like to think of it as your conscience. That voice inside of you, it's kind of guiding you toward things or pushing you back from other things. Or maybe it's even that voice inside of you that's leading you down a dark and negative path. It's that gut intuition, that feeling inside of us that we all recognize and know is there, but none of us can say what it is, why it's there. And I don't even know that we always feel that it's fully a part of us. But it, just like the mind and the body, can be trained and adapted. And it can pull forth a belief that's so resolute and so powerful that it can drive performance even in the physical domain. And it's the same programming as a lot of trauma that people face. If you've dealt with severe and significant trauma and you know what that path is like, then you've been through times where you faced what many would call triggers, things that can kind of activate or bring forth that trauma, whatever it may be. You know, if you're a cancer patient, maybe seeing your old doctors, walking through the hallways, smelling smells that may be hand soaps or things that were in the hospital, things that used to trigger you while you were on chemo and cause vomiting. You hear so many stories of people having programmed vomiting response just from seeing their oncologist, even years after they've been off chemo. This is that conscience programming, that spiritual programming. There's something inside of you that is still so hardwired to respond in certain ways when you face certain circumstances. And I think you hear people talk about it all the time, but you only hear them talk about it in terms of negative aspects, similar to trauma or PTSD or whatever it is people may have gone through. But you don't hear people speak about it in terms of the positive it can bring forth. How you can program that conscience, that third eye, if you will, to react to certain circumstances in a positive manner. And that is one of the core pieces of becoming impossible. Build yourself into a person who is not only capable of facing and overcoming that challenge, but who is ready and who is excited and who is anxious to be able to face that challenge. For me now, anytime I face that heavy weight, even though I have that fear welling up inside of me, the second I lift up that bar, I put my head up and I know it's time to move. My conscience is trained to become excited, to flood my body with every aspect and amount of strength it's able to bring out, to believe that I can move against this, to resolutely and absolutely believe that I can overcome this challenge. Whether I do or whether I don't, it becomes irrelevant, because I've built the highest level of belief that I can. I've trained and developed the conscience to bring out a higher potential than I ever would have had access to had I let it run rampant. And the final domain is the emotional. The emotional can slip into the mental or even the spiritual a lot of times. And it certainly can slip into the physical. If you've ever been so upset by something that you feel nauseated, if you've ever felt so overwhelmed that your head starts hurting, if you've ever felt embarrassed and felt your face flushing, all of these are physical mechanisms that are triggered by an emotional response to a situation. And just as with the spiritual, if these negative responses to stimuli can exist, then the converse has to be true as well. That you can have positive emotional, or you can have positive physical changes from the emotional reactions you have. Think of it as that feeling of getting off work after a long week on a Friday afternoon and you've got a long weekend. That feeling as you're driving down to a vacation for a new destination, a place that you've been excited to see and visit and explore for a long time, and now it's finally here. You suddenly get surges of energy, surges of excitement. Your body seems lighter, able to move more easily. You have a little bit of extra spring in your step. These are all physical changes brought on by positive emotion. And you can figure out how to rewire and program these physical changes in response to certain emotional stimuli as well. Now, I think actually the emotional is the trickiest of all four domains to be able to train up and strengthen and develop, because I think inherently our emotions are the things we have the least control over. They are also the things that can most quickly and readily override our logic, override our conscience, and even override our physical body to where we say or do things that we don't mean in moments of intense emotion. And this is one of the reasons why emotion is the most important to control. And in saying this, I don't mean that we should ever try to lock up our emotion and put it in a box and shove it down and never feel these emotions. Feeling these emotions are incredibly important. And in fact, not feeling them and taking that approach to locking them down and pushing them away is what drove me to some of the very darkest places I've ever been in life. Alcoholism and addiction and being totally ruled by fear for so long. That was driven by suppressing emotion. Rather, what I'm talking about is developing a filter for your emotion. A filter as well as a pressure release valve. Because we have to feel all of these emotions. We need to feel all of these emotions. It's healthy to feel them, healthy to work through them. But what's not healthy is when we allow them to control us, to override any of the other 4 domains in a negative manner. And so the best thing we can learn to do, and this again is a skill, just like all 3 other domains, it's a skill we can develop and harness over time. It takes massive amounts of repetition, massive amounts of volume, but when utilized correctly, it can lead to unlocking some very high-level potential. And I discussed that fear that I have to face. And I have to use my mind to override that emotion, to force my body to move forward and move with that weight, despite how much the fear wants to paralyze me. And it's not that I try to eliminate that emotion of fear. I think there was a time where I used to, but now I've realized that I can use that fear as long as I'm in control of it and not allowing it to control me. It's an ally. It's a part of me. These emotions, whether we deem them positive or negative, which I don't even like assigning those labels to them, because the emotion is never bad. It's the response to the emotion that can be good or bad. And us gaining control over these emotions through filtering and releasing the pressure of them, that's what decides whether it's good or bad, not the emotion itself. And so what I've got to do is I've got to filter that fear. And what happens in those moments is I allow myself to feel that fear. I allow myself to work through that fear, but it's almost as if I've developed a little nozzle that can allow me to control how much or how little of that fear I feel at any given time. And I keep a steady stream, letting it flow through me, letting it work itself out, but I never let it get too intense that it's overwhelming. And I never let it get so light of intensity that it no longer bothers me or no longer is something I'm feeling. Because as I say, I think in these moments, it's important to feel them. In fact, that's how we grow stronger and grow better in this process. So I keep that flow where I know is an appropriate amount, and I only know that from having done it so many times through the practice of repetition. And then I let that pressure release through a healthy manner that's not going to negatively affect any of my priorities or any of my pursuits in life. And in fact, I can take it one step further to help it positively affect them. I release all of that fear and let it flow through my body and let it react and let it ignite. And the moment I hit depth and go to push that weight up. And in doing so, I cause a profound physical response of anger and aggression and strength and movement and dumping of catecholamines and endorphins and adrenaline and all of the other biochemical molecules and neurotransmitters. And it helps give me strength in those moments. And I'm able to fully open that pressure release valve on that emotion of fear to the point when I lock out that lift, set it down in the rack, all I'm left with is pure, utter joy. Joy for having had the opportunity to face that challenge. Joy for the opportunity to work through that fear mentally and emotionally and even spiritually. And to know that I've gained even a little bit more experience in being able to control that emotion. And this is just one instance that pertains to the squat, but all three of these domains I lay out, the mental, the spiritual, and the emotional, can all be utilized toward any passion or pursuit you have in life. And that's not ever to neglect the physical as well, because as we've talked about since the beginning of the show, the physical training of your body is just as important as the other three. It's one of the ones that can be totally strong and locked in one moment and be totally broken and crushed in another. And it's something that can happen more easily than in the other three domains. But that's why we build up all four domains. We chase our highest potential in all four domains. We practice repetition and strengthening and development of all four domains. Because when one of these domains is weaker, when one of these domains is broken, the other two or three or however many you still have access left to can help bring a higher potential out of that broken area. And not only that, but they can work together to fix and heal that broken area. I felt this most strongly when I first started getting on a better path, coming out of my addiction and some of the darkest places I've been in. For me, training became the most important thing on that journey. Physical training in the weight room, running, doing whatever it was, really. Because that physical mechanism, that physical trigger, particularly chasing strength, physical strength, became that first pressure release valve I had for all of that mountain of emotion I had stored for so long. Allowed me to work through and process for the first time ever since having been diagnosed with cancer all of these things I had kept locked up. And in doing so, I started to learn how to train and develop that emotional strength. From there, I learned how to train and develop that mental strength, and ultimately, those three together gave me the keys to unlocking spiritual strength, which so far I've found to be infinite and unlimited. Because I have seen and experienced and had the honor to witness people in life's very, very darkest moments be able to maintain strength of spirit and put on displays of strength through that domain that rival some of the greatest feats in human history. It's that spiritual strength that carried me as far as it did in the Columbus Marathon 2023. It's that spiritual strength that has put me under squat bars I had no business touching and still moved with them. And it's that spiritual strength, as well as the mental, emotional, and physical domains of performance, that will allow me to climb under 500 pounds in just 4 days' time. Lower down to the most physically vulnerable point I could ever be, and make the decision to rise with that weight, bringing forth my very highest strength in all four domains of performance to unleash a potential beyond anything I could have dreamed for. And when you learn to implement and harness and strengthen and develop these 4 domains of performance in your own life, that's where you will find the impossible. That is when you will become impossible yourself, which, as we've discussed, will inevitably lead to you doing the impossible. You know, if you think back to the episode I did a few weeks ago, the last solo episode I did, where I discussed exactly where my mind and my spirit and my emotion goes, the time point that I travel back to that kid who was coming off chemo, coming off ECMO, who wanted more than anything to sit up and to stand up and was not able to. And how I sit up and I stand up for that kid. That is the most powerful driving force that puts me in that place where I'm maximizing all 4 domains of performance more than anything else I've ever experienced. But there is another kid who I've been thinking about quite a lot recently. It's the kid who lived through that darkness of his mind and his emotion and his spirit, controlling him and tearing him down, leading him down the darkest paths imaginable. And how he, through initially the physical domain, was able to start climbing out of that bottomless pit. And one day he got under a squat bar, a movement he never thought he would be able to do. And he squatted 135 pounds. Now granted, it wouldn't have held up remotely in powerlifting competition. It was very shaky, very unstable. Depth was very questionably high. But he did something he never thought he'd be able to do, with a weight he never thought he'd be able to utilize. And that opened something for him. One of the things that's most exciting for me to think about is that if the man I am today could walk through those university gym doors, come up to that kid, pat him on the back, and let him know that one day he would do the same thing with 500 pounds, that man would have been that kid's hero. And while the pride I feel and the knowledge of that truth is immense and nearly overwhelming for me, what's even more exciting for me to think about is the man I'll be 10 years from now that I can't even fathom at the moment. Yeah, that man may not be squatting 500 pounds anymore, but I know that he will be achieving things leagues beyond anything I could have deemed possible in this moment, sitting in this chair right now. And I know this will be true because I've found my passion. I've dedicated myself to my purpose. And I know that it's something I will never stray from. It is the language of my life. It is the music that I hear every time I close my eyes. And it's this vision that will be the infinite game we play for the rest of our lives. Because at Impossible Performance, We are striving to build a global culture of strength, fostering a spirit of growth in constant pursuit of the impossible. I would ask you guys to really listen to those words of our vision statement. Go back 15 seconds if you need to. Listen to it again a few times if needed. Those aren't words we just came up with. Those aren't words that just sound good on camera and on the microphone. Those are the guiding words that all of us at Impossible Performance are building in our lives and one day in the entire world. It is the greatest honor of my life to have you guys on this journey with me as a part of what we're doing. And along with that, the best way you can help us do that is to live out this message, this mindset in your own life and help instill this mission into every action in your daily life, because that's how we create this vision that we've established. In 4 days, I will face probably the greatest fear I ever have in the physical world anyway. I will have to willingly put myself under that bar, move with that weight, and have the opportunity to find my highest potential under it. Couldn't be more thankful. I couldn't be more honored. And if any of you guys want to come out and be a part of this event in any way, shape, or form, come out to Monsters Bent Barbell on 7th Street in Parkersburg, West Virginia on Saturday, August 23rd, 2025. Lifting will start around 9 a.m. and squats are up first. We'd love to have each and every one of you there. If you're interested in becoming involved in this event some way, reach out to me on any of our socials or message me directly. We'll get you hooked up. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for being a part of everything we do at Impossible Performance. Thank you for being the vision we have for the world. We have a long way to go, and we're just getting started. And as always, be impossible.